Here we are, coming back in to ECW, A Matter of Respect.
Now for something completely different.
That's right. So we just finished up with the world title match, oddly placed in the middle of the beginning of the card,
Yeah.
and now we have Chris Jericho and Mikey Whipwreck.
Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised when I saw this match on here. I remember a little bit of Jericho's work in ECW, and I remember being a fan. Um, yeah, look at this handsome young man here. Like young Jericho, man. Um,
Yeah,
I thought it was interesting that he was billed as being from Calgary, which he is not.
yeah. I have
He's
a
from
couple,
Winnipeg.
yeah, a couple notes on that. In fact,
He's also billed as the last survivor of the Heart Dungeon,
yeah,
which I thought just sounded cool.
yeah.
And it's
Well,
interesting, like how young he was here, but they really build him up as like this dude's special. This dude's a big deal. Um,
and he would go on to do okay.
he'd be all right. Yeah, he'd make a couple bucks in the business.
Yeah,
I heard he even beat Rock and Stone Cold on the same night.
yeah,
Although
and
I only heard him say it once. Not beat it into the fucking ground.
and then he is the first ever AEW champion as well.
Yeah, yeah, he's
So
done some things.
yeah, he does have a lot of really significant records as far as championships and things.
Oh
Um,
yeah,
WCW just couldn't do anything with him.
it's funny because when I think about a lot of my favorite Jericho moments, they were in WCW. Uh,
His feud with Dean Malenko is
yes,
priceless.
like when he went to Washington D.C. and he was wearing a suit and he was talking to people on the street, and he goes into like the Library of Congress and stuff. Like that was great stuff.
Yep.
Ralphus, like, or how he went like 20-0 against Goldberg, like
Yeah.
before they'd ever wrestled a match.
Well, and that had a lot to do with what did him in WCW was his little altercation with Goldberg.
Yeah. No, I don't blame him at all, but when I think of some of my fondest Jericho moments, a lot of them were WCW.
Yeah.
Um, and a lot of his best matches, I think, were in WCW too. Um,
He
so
also
yeah,
has a little bit of a music career as well.
yeah, yeah, and he's got podcasts and he's got books and he has a cruise and
He is a cruise.
yeah, he does a Jericho cruise once a year where like he gets a bunch of like podcasters and stand-up comics and wrestlers,
Oh,
and he does a cruise, and you can like pay to be on the cruise, and they do live podcasts and there's stand-up comedy shows. They have wrestling matches. Um,
that sounds amazing.
yeah, he does it once a year, and he gets like a lot of like the AEW guys to go, and they have matches on the cruise and stuff. So
I would love to know what exactly, um, like where the breakdown point was with him and WWE Creative, because I know that's when they started to bring in a lot of TV writers, and the whole developmental process became something set in stone. If you're
yeah,
put into that machine, you are locked into it until you get out the end, and there's no horseplay, monkey business, or other some funny words. But I know he had a lot of problem with that process, the creative process.
yeah, and I think there was like a tipping point where he was because he would like leave for a while, then come back and kind of reinvent himself, and he would he liked working that way, where he'd come in for a year or two, have a run, leave, go make an album and tour, then come back and have a different look and whatever. Which is cool. But I think during one of his comebacks, I think he was frustrated with, like, he was booked like not a top guy anymore, and I think that frustrated him. I think it might have been like a WrestleMania, and he was told it would be one thing, and then he ended up opening the show, and
Uh,
he just felt like, okay, I'm never going to be a top guy here. Like I've been moved down the card permanently, and I think that was kind of like, all right, I'm out of here then. I
well,
believe that was the case.
yeah, yeah, that definitely sounds right. But it was around this time too where, um, again, I've just heard lots of guys talk about it in their podcast where, bringing in TV writers, script writers,
Yeah,
and you started to see a lot less kind of innovation from the boys when they were out there.
yeah,
And sometimes that worked great, but in like the last year since I started to follow WWE regularly again, it doesn't work for me, brother.
yeah. And
Everybody comes out, and some of the guys who are not charismatic just have long, boring, uncharismatic things to say, or it sounds weird, like when Bobby Lashley says, "Brock Lesnar, let's fight in front of this crowd," and I'm like,
yeah, it's. I think that's one of the biggest turning points in the business was when wrestlers started being handed scripts.
I agree.
Especially to people who were so good at the previous way of doing things, people like Flair or Shawn or Jericho, and then you hand someone a script where it's like, how the fuck do you have the nerve to go up to Ric Flair and tell him this is what you're saying tonight? Like, I would be embarrassed for myself if I was that person.
Yeah,
And I know Jericho has a reputation that he is not shy about making his opinions known.
not one bit at all. And again, I can understand that. I mean, he debuted and interrupted The Rock,
Yeah.
and it went great.
I one of the in my mind, and I didn't prepare for this, but I think that may have been the best debut ever.
I can't think of anything off the top of my head.
With the countdown clock, and he interrupts dead square in the middle of Rock's promo, and then just runs down the entire WWE locker room and calls him boring, which I guess he got a lot of legit heat for.
I'm sure. But when he finally kind of had the shackles taken off, was given a mic and a stage, and let's see what you can do, kid. And it was a grand slam.
Yeah, Jericho's always been one of those guys that was the total package. Like, he had the look, he had the athleticism, he could work, he could talk, he could work babyface or heel equally as good. Like, you know, he had everything.
Some of the stuff he cut on Stephanie is just
Oh yeah,
priceless.
he was brutal with her.
Yeah. All right, so we have Jericho and Mikey Whipwreck.
Yeah, and it's fun. This was very much just a classic wrestling match. Like, they're exchanging kind of intricate holds and stuff. Just very kind of classic wrestling. Like, nothing really extreme, nothing super violent, just kind of classic wrestling here. Um, the tombs. Oh, I think I lost your sound.
No, I forgot I
Oh,
was
okay.
muted. Trying to block out the sniffles from the recording.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
I loved the bow and arrow right in the beginning.
Yeah.
Very few, very few times have you seen that in like modern day wrestling, and that that made me smile.
Well, it's funny because there was like a crop of guys in this era that had kind of traveled the same path as far as they've gone to a lot of the same places internationally. They'd worked in Mexico, they'd worked in Europe, they'd worked in Japan, and kind of picked up the best of each style and worked with the best people of each style, and then kind of came up with this fantastic hybrid style. And I think of like guys like Jericho, Benoit, Eddie, Dean, like those guys kind of all traveled the same journey and picked up the best of everything and really blended it all together into
Yeah.
something amazing. Where it's like they could fight, they could brawl, they could wrestle, they could fly, like they could do everything.
Yep.
And Jericho's one of those guys, and that's why like that crop of guys I kind of hold as like because they all were around the same age too,
Yeah.
and they also kind of had similar journeys to the top. So it was kind of like those guys kind of have a special place in my heart for me,
Yeah.
um,
The Filthy
because they
Animals
really
did all
did
right.
have this amazing hybrid style.
Yeah.
Where they could do lucha, they could do Japanese strong style, they could do European chain wrestling. They could, there
Yeah.
was no chink in their armor.
Well, and back around like the early to mid '90s too, stuff like that, at least in the U.S., was a novelty.
Well,
Um,
that's the thing when that particular group of guys when they came to the U.S. and got on mainstream television, it was like, okay, these guys are next level. Like these guys are special, and people ate them up.
yeah. Yeah. They were doing stuff that you normally didn't see, and how it was like. I know we've talked a lot about um, how Bischoff started to kind of program Nitro and him bringing in these guys from Japan and Conan, I believe, helped him get stuff from Mexico.
Yeah, I know Conan was very integral in that.
Yeah, but
The Tombstone reversal spot that they did, that didn't go well.
no, no, it was a reverse tombstone, but only barely.
Yeah, that looked very dangerous.
Yeah,
That
yeah, and the tombstone does not have a flawless record when it comes to not breaking guys' necks.
no, it does not. It's been known to be dangerous from time to time.
Yeah,
And it is cool kind of watching Jericho at this point in his career, where you do kind of see some of the shades of the Jericho that we grew to know and love over the years. You kind of see that charisma and the personality and the athleticism, but it's like it hasn't all come together yet, but you can see like it's there.
yeah.
He hasn't put everything together yet, but it's definitely there.
Yeah, there were some USA chants, which I had to pop for.
Yeah,
Um, and there
I
were
thought the
people in
ECW
the
crowd was better than that.
yeah, and there were some people that had a big Canadian flag that they were holding up too.
Yeah, I think there was a sign that said something about hosers,
Yeah,
which I don't
but
even actually know what that means. It's just funny to me whenever I hear someone say hoser.
yeah,
I should ask my
I
Uncle Tony what it actually means.
I think it's Hoosiers. Are the Hoosiers the Canadian sports team? Let me see here. Ca- Oh yeah, hoser. Um, or hose head is a slang term originating in Canada that is used to reference or imitate Canadians. Hoser, Hoosier.
Yeah, and I think it isn't it kind of like mildly derogatory, but like in a Canadian way. So like
Like it's calling someone like a redneck or a hick.
I think so, but like because Canada's so polite, it's sort of like as mildly derogatory as you could possibly as Canadians are capable of being. I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. We'll have to follow up on that. And I will say this in my job, we do have a lot of Canadian customers, not for much longer because a Canadian company bought out all of our Canadian customers. And Canadians may be nice to Americans when they're in America, but when I called them, and they're well aware that I am not Canadian, they are really mean.
Oh, okay.
Really, really mean.
I didn't know they had it in them.
Yeah, yeah, yep. They can be mean, like I said, nice on TV, but You put an American in Canada, and just let them go wild. They are really mean, in like a hilarious kind of way. Um, but yeah, right after that reverse tombstone, both guys are up on the top rope, and Jericho does kind of like a standing drop kick off the top rope, and Mikey went over and landed on the rail, and that looked rough.
Yeah, I did kind of pop because there was like a fan heckling Jericho at one point, and I could clearly hear the fan say, they shouted, "Did you learn nothing in the dungeon?"
I did not hear that.
So I thought that was kind of fun.
Yeah,
The overall thing of this match, and I really can't explain why I feel this way, this felt a little flat for me.
yeah.
And it's weird because both guys worked hard. Everything was fine. They did a lot of good wrestling. There was some good high spots. But I can't explain why this was just kind of like, for me. And I
I
was
had
excited to see Jericho here, but
yeah.
like the match, I just left feeling like, eh. And maybe it's because the rest of the show was so spectacular up to this point and following it.
It was. I had similar thoughts, and I don't know that I could kind of put my finger on it.
Yeah, I mean, there was good action. Both guys worked hard. I felt like I should like this more than I did.
The crowd was into it, but they were not on the edge of their seats in this match either.
It wasn't like when Sabu came out earlier.
No, no.
um, so Jericho ends up winning with a double underhook superplex, that was impressive.
Yep.
Um,
When they were in the crowd, Mikey was on the ground, and Jericho starts piling chairs on him,
yeah,
and then like takes the chair and just smacks him with it. Um,
yeah,
I kind of got a kick out of that. Um, and the only other thing that I had noted was that when they were getting out of the crowd to go back to the ring, some guy offered Mikey a beer,
I didn't catch
and
that.
like Mikey had to actually kind of push it away to get by, and so I thought that was kind of funny.
I missed that.
Um, yeah, there were a couple good top rope maneuvers in here. The double underhook superplex. Um,
Yeah, that was a cool move.
yeah, Jericho did a 4.5 star splash, frog splash.
Yeah.
Did a second one, ate Mikey's feet for it. Um, there, I got really excited when I heard them say "Lion Salt" by Chris Jericho because I can't remember the last time I saw him do that.
Yeah, and I remember he used to beat people with that move.
I know it was very graceful, but it
Yeah,
was
like young Jericho, like he just floated when he did that lion salt. Like he just hop up there flawlessly and just very smooth.
yeah. And there was a top rope Franken Mikey.
Yeah. Yeah, Mikey was deceptively athletic.
Yeah. And they mentioned it too, but he is an ECW Triple Crown winner at this point.
Yeah, which I don't have anything against Mikey Whipwreck, but that just doesn't sound right to me. Because I think that's a
Yeah.
pretty short list. I think, isn't it like Mikey,
At
Taz, and Sabu?
at this point?
Douglas, maybe. Too. I mean, all time. Douglas probably it. Yeah, Douglas as well, I think.
Yeah,
It's a pretty short list.
it is.
But then there's the Grand Slam ECW winners, which I believe is only Sabu and Taz, because both of them held the FTW title as well.
That's right.
Because Sabu just put masking tape over it and wrote Sabu in Sharpie
Yep.
over where it said Taz.
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah. I'll have to buff up on my ECW title history and chat about that after our next ECW event.
so up next, we have the ECW TV title match. The
Yeah.
champion, Too Cold Scorpio, is defending against the franchise Shane Douglas.
4-time TV champion.
Yeah, and I was like, when these guys came out, I'm like, these guys are both in phenomenal shape. I don't think I'd ever seen Scorpio physically look as good as he did right here. Like Scorpio was in shape here, and Shane was always in good shape, but
Yeah,
I was just surprised, like seeing both of them. Where it's like, man, these dudes are like peak physical condition here.
yeah.
Um,
And the only thing that I kind of noted in the beginning was that Joey talked a little bit about Shane saying that he's above the TV title.
which is an odd thing to say when the person you just said that about is in a TV title match. That kind of shits all over the match before it even happens.
And the title too, maybe. But
Yeah,
here's the thing, though. In today's wrestling, Conrad put it best. He was talking with Bruce about it, where you have like guys nowadays who are former world champions wrestling for the U.S. title. That's like they're
yeah,
fighting for a demotion.
right.
And here,
Maybe that's what Jericho wanted to avoid.
yeah, and here we kind of had that, and so I thought that was odd. It was a little, scratching my head, but because Shane is a former world champion, I don't know what the angle was with this, but I actually kind of like that they drawn attention to that instead of just like, oh, Shane's going to be whatever. It's like, no, I'm a world champion. I'm above this.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
did notice that Joel Gertner, when he was doing his ring announcements and he was announcing Scorpio, um, he used the same intro that he would go on to use for Devon,
Yep.
where like Scorpio is 200 and whatever pounds of, you know, cut, chisel, jacked, whatever, he would go on to do that for Devon.
Yep.
Scorpio grabs a WWF shirt from the crowd,
Hmm.
and then he's holding it like taunting Shane like he's a matador.
Hmm.
Shane wipes his ass with it.
The crowd appreciated that.
Yeah, and you could just feel the tension between these guys. Like you could cut it with a knife. Like there was a like that kind of that big fight feel
Yeah.
in the air here between these two guys, and it was like very different from the NWA title tournament where these guys competed in the finals. This felt bigger to me,
It did.
which is odd because it's for the TV title. Um, when Shane had had his failed experiment in the WWF and come back. But you could definitely feel it in the air where it's like, this is a big fight feel.
There
And
was
these
just
guys
a lot
seemed
of
like they
tension.
couldn't stand each other. Yeah, it felt very tense in a good way.
Yeah. Yep. No, I had that too. And Shane takes or he gets a hold of the WWF shirt and then rips it. You can see the guy in the front row who had it go
I didn't catch that.
because that was his shirt he brought.
What did he think was going to happen to it when you bring a WWF shirt to an ECW show? You know you're not getting that back.
Yeah.
Certainly not in the same condition you brought it in.
I did think too how much one of those shirts would be worth nowadays.
Oh yeah.
Like a vintage WWF logo, plain old shirt, I bet would be kind of a rarity, I would think.
Yeah, it'll probably be worth quite a bit.
Yeah.
Um, so they get going in the match. The action's really intense. They're kind of feeling each other out. No one has any clear cut advantage for a while. Um, this is like pretty much just a straight up clinic these guys are putting on wrestling wise.
Yeah, yeah. I did feel that it was kind of slow going. Even during the feeling out process, for me, it just felt a little sluggish at first. But
See, this to me, these guys had me right from the start. Like I was very into this right from the beginning. Like there's a ton of like great holds and takedowns and
yeah,
counters and escapes and um so yeah, I was hooked right from the start.
and until Joey mentioned it, I had actually forgot that this is a rematch from the finals of the NWA tournament.
That was the first thing I thought when I saw this match was like, because I remember that match being good. I thought this match was great. I
Yeah,
thought both these guys really stepped it up from their previous match, what, 2 years earlier?
yeah. I I, I mean, I definitely want to chat about this once we get through it, but this match was incredible.
And I just liked the feeling of this because it seemed like, sometimes you watch a match and it's like, okay, they map this out move for move. This didn't feel like that to me. This looked like two athletes competing against each other.
Yeah.
Um,
They did have some chain wrestling in the beginning, like you said, very technical, fielding each other out process, and then I was having trouble describing it, but it was like a standing slingshot suplex off
yeah,
of the ropes and onto the rail,
yeah,
and that was a hard hit on that rail.
yeah. It was really hard. Like that looked bad.
Yeah,
Well, it's funny because I think so. They do the feeling out with the wrestling, and then I think, and I like this because it was like there was one thing that changes the whole complexion of the match, where it's like, okay, this chapter's over. We're done feeling each other out. Now we're shifting into the next gear. So Douglas throws Scorp out of the ring. He grabs a chair and then he has a seat and then he tosses it in Scorp's face. And that to me was like the chair's involved. Now we're switching gears and we're stepping it up. And then yeah, there's the thing with the kind of the slingshot suplex thing with the guardrail. That looked really painful.
yeah.
Um,
Shane did pick up a cooler that somebody had in the audience, and he opened it up, and I don't know if it was beer or soda, but he throws those down to get a bottle of water to hit Scorpio with.
and then what about that
Yeah.
sick power bomb on the concrete?
Release power bomb onto
Yeah,
the floor. That
Scorpio took some punishment here, man.
like
That
I
power bomb, I went back and rewatched it. That was sick.
yeah, and that caught me off guard too. I mean, like I
Yeah,
kept
I was watching it, just they were going along, and I saw that. I'm like, oh no, you
yeah,
don't
that
do that to someone.
yeah, that jolted me out of my seat. That was
Yeah, and
ow.
then
Wow, wow.
Scorpio, yeah, that looked brutal. And yeah, I went back and rewatched it, and I'm like, oh, like it was like uncomfortable to watch, like exposed
Yeah.
concrete. It's ECW, no mats. Uh, and Douglas didn't take it easy on him. And then
No.
there's a pair of kicks to the nuts that Scorp does on Douglas. And I noticed, and it's funny because I guess Scorpio must have heard me back in 1996 when I took this note. I noticed that up to this point in the match, Scorpio has done zero high flying, which I thought was interesting.
I didn't
And then
think about
right after I wrote that note, he started doing tons of high flying. But I did notice, I was like, Scorp has not done any high flying so far.
that. Yeah.
And
He
then my
did
next
have
note was, it says a lot about how good he is that he can have a match like this without doing what he's known for doing.
yeah,
And then immediately after that, he does a handspring cartwheel kick and a springboard moonsault to the
yeah.
outside.
He sure did. And he also had like that flipping upside down soccer kick,
Yeah,
kind of like a Pele kick right to
yeah,
Shane's face.
yeah. But I just think it's funny that I wrote he's done zero high flying so far. That says so much about him that he can have this good of a match without any high flying. Then he does a handspring cartwheel kick and a springboard moonsault to the outside as soon as I finished writing that.
Well, he probably heard you and is like,
Yeah,
"Oh yeah, yeah,
but
we got
again, that's one of the things, and I like when matches are structured like this, save it and then have it so when he does it, it matters more, where it's like, okay, now this is opening up. We're kicking it into a next gear. So I like matches that progress like that.
yeah,
And this certainly did that.
yeah." And this was a much longer match than I had kind of thought it would be too. So I can definitely appreciate how they kind of planned that out to structure it from one thing
Yeah.
to the next instead of just like a 25-minute car crash.
Right. And we've talked about matches like when we covered ScyberSlam, Scorpio versus Sabu. As soon as the bell rang, they did not stop or slow down. They didn't put their foot anywhere near the brake that entire match for a half hour.
Mhm.
And that was spectacular. This is spectacular because of the build.
Yeah.
So very different types of matches. Um, yeah, Douglas is on a table on the outside, and Scorp
Yeah.
is in the ring and dives out. Um, and then Douglas just he vanishes,
Yeah, he pulls a
and then
Houdini.
attacks him from the other side of the ring. I'm like, where the fuck did he go, and how did he get over on the other side? We didn't see it. Like, I
I
don't know
know.
how he did it.
Yeah,
He's an
I
illusionist.
I popped really good for that.
Yeah.
That was cool. Because like I didn't even notice he wasn't there until I see him come running onto the screen. Um, and
Yeah, it was like, how did he get over there? Like, I couldn't see how he did that.
yeah,
But I was like, this match has everything. It's like great technical wrestling, brawling, flying, hard strikes, psychology, intensity. Like, this was so good, man.
yeah,
And I love that, like, this show as a whole, there's so many really, really good matches, and they're really good in different ways and for different reasons. And that's the thing that I love about a really good wrestling show, if they can pull that off. And this one did.
yeah. Scorpio had a really nice super kick.
I did notice, well, at one point, Douglas runs and jumps off the chair and kicks Scorpio on the ropes down to the outside. And it reminded me of the Mind Game spot where Sean did that to Mick Foley when Mick's on the ropes and
Oh
he has
yeah,
the chair in front of his face, and Sean runs and jumps and kicks the chair into Mick's face. And
that's
then I'm
right.
thinking, that hasn't happened yet. It happened here first.
You are correct.
Because I was like, that reminds me of the Mind Game spot where Sean kicks the chair in the mix face, and I was like, that didn't happen yet. This happened.
Mhm.
Like, that's pretty cool.
Well, and I
And
bet
Douglas
it.
didn't do it as smooth as Sean did, but no one does anything as smooth as Sean does it. So,
Yeah. Well, and Mick had just graduated from ECW to WWF at the time. Um,
yeah,
and so if something like that was going to be incorporated, um, I I don't know like who in the business was watching ECW tapes. I can't really imagine that Sean was, and it absolutely could have been organic both times. But you're you're right. I didn't
yeah.
even
I mean, I don't
notice
think that
that.
either Mick or Sean stole that. Like, watched this match and said, "Let's do that." They probably didn't watch this. That spot seems like something that either Sean or Mick would have come up with on their own. So I don't think anyone stole anything, but it was a similar spot that
Yeah.
happened in both companies. So yeah, Scorp hits that beautiful super kick you talked about. His great moonsault. He hits a 450, and then Scorp doesn't go for the pin after any of those things, and that kind of annoys me as much as a lot of the last several ECW shows that we've covered have been really good shows that Scorpio is kind of the MVP of to me. Um, like his matches and his performances have kind of stolen the show on a lot of the ECW shows in this era, but it really annoys the shit out of me when anyone, not just him, does the "I've got you beat and I'll pull you up before the 3 count." I
Yeah.
don't like it.
Because almost always once you do that, it's kind of obvious where it's usually obvious where that's going to go.
Yeah,
Um,
and there very rarely does it make sense for someone to do that. And with Scorpio, it's just I don't like it, and he's been doing a lot of it in some of these matches. Um, Spectacular matches, but that just kind of bothers me a little bit.
I went back and rewatched his 450. I know we have talked a lot about how graceful his high flying is
Yeah.
for a guy his size and his build. His 450 looks. And it looks like he's like spinning on a it is just so fluid.
It's a thing of beauty. And another thing he does that I love is his moonsault into the leg drop.
Yeah,
I love when he
yeah,
does that. But yeah, he is just smooth as silk with when he goes up top.
yeah. And then he does a rock bottom. I had to giggle at that.
Yeah. Well, Douglas goes for his belly to belly, which is Douglas's finish. Scorp counters it into the rock bottom. And at that point, Gertner announces there's 5 minutes left out of the 30-minute time limit. So that kind of plants in your head, are they going to go to a 30-minute draw like Scorp did with Sabu?
Yeah,
Um, Scorp gets Douglas up to go for a top rope Hurricane Rana. Douglas counters it into a super bomb, which was really nice.
yeah,
And then he hits a top rope belly to belly for the win. So we got a new TV champ. My next note was, fuck, this was good, with 3
yeah.
exclamation points. My next note after that is the TV title is ugly and plain with no side plates,
I made a
which
note of that. Thank
which
you.
I figured we would discuss because I know I noticed the belts. I know you notice them more than me, but that is an ugly ass title.
Yeah,
Douglas proceeds to cut a phenomenal promo
yeah,
about his 6 months in hell. He puts over all the greats that he's worked with in his career. He puts over ECW. He shakes Scorp's hand and says that Scorp is the best that he's worked with and is a step above even him. And it sounded so sincere. Um, just a, I cannot say enough good things about this promo. He talks about respect, which, the name of the show is A Matter of Respect. And then he asks Scorpio to strap the title on him. Scorp teases like he's going to do it and then attacks Douglas, hits a top rope leg drop with a chair draped across Shane's face. Um, this was so good, man. Like, this was,
yeah.
oof, I
Um,
love this so much.
yeah, right from the start with the build up where they got the WWF shirt kind of, you know,
And the holding it out like a matador. I love that.
yeah. And then Joey acknowledging that Shane has some pretty derogatory thoughts about the television title and um,
Yeah.
the television champion. Um, I did write how just awful that belt looks with no side plates.
Yeah.
And I wondered if it ever did have side plates and they just fell off. I did some searching that I wasn't able to find anything like that. But um,
I love the psychology here. There's the history that they played off of, that these two had competed for the NWA title, um, which Douglas won that one too. But
yeah,
I mean, everything about this was so good. The match itself had such a good variety of just wrestling, flying, brawling, great like counters and reversals. That brutal power bomb,
yeah.
like, um, and this match had everything, and this was so good. I love this so much.
Well, and you had brought up the last time we saw a TV title match with Scorpio, they started to announce the time left. We're pushing almost 30 minutes here. And so when I saw Shane get the win almost in like the last minute, I'm like, I think that was pretty intentional. That's pretty clever. It's like,
That's a
okay,
good
we're gonna
swerve
go.
because you think
Yeah.
they've been fighting for their life this whole time. They announced there's 5 minutes left. They didn't have to announce that,
Nope.
but they chose to, which plants the seed. They're going to go the whole 30 minutes. So then when Douglas does get the pin, it's like, oh, I didn't see that coming. So
Yep.
the smart booking.
Yeah. This was a swerve, a well done swerve.
Yeah.
Um,
And then also because of the way that Douglas, with Joey's help, kind of disrespected that he's even wrestling for this title to begin with, you're thinking, okay, they're not going to have him take it off Scorpio, and then he
Yeah,
does. Like,
yeah, yeah.
so just perfectly done.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of sleight of hand with this
Yep.
match all around, and uh, it was flawless for me.
Yeah, me
Uh,
too.
I mean, even knowing what the outcome was, it's just captivated me. This is another match that I kind of had a little trouble trying to keep note of because there was so much going on, and I was just in the moment watching it,
Yeah.
enjoying it.
Yep.
Um, and Shane, I know you've said that you've come to find a little bit more, have more fondness for Shane since we started covering
Going
ECW
back,
stuff.
yeah, because in 1996, I thought Shane was pretty overrated, if I'm being honest.
Hmm.
And I thought that he kind of, other than his promos, like match wise, I didn't think he fit in to the ECW style. Going back and watching this stuff, even some of the Dean Douglas stuff with the promos he cut and his complete commitment to a really shitty gimmick, um, I've got a lot more respect for him going back, rewatching this stuff than I did at this time for sure. So I admit that I was wrong.
Well, I
I
was
remember I remember Tony was always a big Shane Douglas guy, and I never got at the time what he saw in him. I get it now. Like, and I admit I was wrong. So,
well, what I was trying to say is that you've always given him credit for his mic skills,
oh
um,
yeah,
base, and
and
so
this was a great example of that because that promo was so. He even referenced his father, like he did when he won the NWA title off from Scorp in that match, and he did the same thing here. And the way he put over the company and all of the greats he worked with, and put over Scorpio, like you're better than all of them. You're even better than me. Like, so good.
he won the crowd over
Yeah,
with this promo. And this, I mean, this was, I literally had chills like at a few
yeah.
points in
And
here.
credit to Shane too for a guy who was already called the franchise and was a multiple time ECW champion, then left, which is the greatest sin you could commit to an ECW crowd, fail, come back and win them over again. That's impressive.
It is impressive,
That is not a
especially,
forgiving audience. And so for him to be able to pull that off, like kudos to him.
yeah, and especially with how brutal the audience is, but also how horrible his gimmick was.
Yeah.
I mean, if I was a hardcore ECW fan in the Philly area back then, and I saw him as a franchise leave and go do that, I'd be chuckling every Monday night.
Yeah. I'd be like, good riddance. That's what you get.
Yeah,
But he won
and
him
so
back.
yeah, and even though I have always kind of like Shane, um, this I thought was some of his finest work.
Yeah. It's funny because Shane and Taz were two guys that in this era, because I know you were a big Taz guy and Tony was a big Shane guy, and I just didn't see it with either of those guys. And looking back, rewatching this stuff, I appreciate both of those guys a lot more than I did back then, for sure.
Yeah, yeah. This was thrilling from beginning to end. It it was great. I was surprised at how great it ended up being. Not that I
Yeah.
didn't think it was going to be good or great, but
Well, these guys, it's not surprising. Both these guys are fantastic in ring performers, and the NWA title match they had in that tournament was a really good match. This was next level. This was like I expected it to be good. I was given great.
yeah,
That's what they gave me. So,
yeah. That promo was top level for anyone.
yeah,
Um, and he's like, now put the belt around my waist.
yeah.
I was like, there you go. I'm like, good job.
So
Uh,
then
mm,
up next, the match that this show is named for. We have a respect match between Rob Van Dam and Sabu. They give the backstory that, these Van Dam is new to the company. He came in. Sabu won that first encounter. And Van Dam did not show respect to Sabu. So now this match, whoever wins, the loser has to shake the hand of the winner and acknowledge that they respect him,
Mhm.
which sounds like a silly ass stipulation, but it worked here.
It did.
Um, these guys both just right out of the gates, they go like 0 to breaking the sound barrier. They do
Yeah.
not feel each other out like Scorpio and Douglas did. Sabu is not known for doing that. Neither is Van Dam.
Yeah. And so that was kind of comical.
I got like, and that's the thing where it's like when I think of innovative offense, these two guys might be number 1 and 2 on my list of all time. So then when you put them together, it's like, oh man, here we go. um,
And it does not disappoint.
it does not. I got it. Sabu did a phenomenal job. He jumps off the chair to the top and does a Frankensteiner, and he does such a good job of shifting in midair to avoid hitting the chair on the way down.
Yeah.
I thought that was super cool because it was like, okay, you just avoided crippling someone, so nicely done to like shift in midair. I loved his really nice springboard DDT. Um, I wrote, it is not surprising how hard these guys are hitting each other because they were both hitting each other really hard. And I know that's sort of the thing, like you hear like wrestlers talk where it's like when you're in there with your buddy, you hit them harder than you would anyone else. Like
Yeah.
I know everyone says that, and um, neither of these guys are known for holding back. I know Van Dam has a reputation for being super stiff, but these guys hit each other really hard.
Well, and Van Dam was also critiqued for going a million miles an hour all of the time, and for not, letting the heat build up. Like
Yeah,
I remember I saw an interview with Sean back in the '90s
yeah,
where he's like, "What do you think of Rob Van Dam?" He's like, "I haven't seen a whole lot of him." He's like, "The only thing I would say is to kind of just slow down. You don't always need to, uh, you know, s- go scorched earth with all your arsenal and everything like that." But
and that's every veteran says that about every up and comer in that generation, and no one listens. And then that young generation gets older, and then they start saying it, and then the next younger generation says "fuck you," and then, so that's just the way of the world.
well, and if you do kind of line up all of the guys from WWF and ECW, Rob is the counterpoint to Sean. So,
That was always kind of my dream match
yeah,
in this era. Was I would have loved to have seen Van Dam in his prime versus Shawn in his prime. Um,
yeah.
like if I could have had 1997 Van Dam versus 1997 Shawn, um, I would have needed a notebook. I would have been throwing my panties at him, like because that would have been a dream match for me for sure.
Yeah,
Uh, and it's funny that Sean said that about Van Dam because people said that about Sean.
yeah, yep. And so I always wondered if maybe, um, I don't know, like again, those guys were, they were lined up against each other between like the two promotions and everything. And so,
Yeah,
um, I don't remember much else from the interview. It I just remember that Rob had not gone to WWE, WWF yet, I don't think. And so it was just cool trying to see or seeing Sean have to acknowledge these people. Not that he was, disavowing anything. It's just you didn't
right,
talk about other guys, you didn't go to other promotion shows. And so just
right.
kind of, seeing him ask point blank what it was, I just, kind of got a
And
tickle
it's
from.
funny because Sean probably hadn't seen a whole lot of Rob at that point, but man, that would have been a match.
Yeah.
the two of those guys in their prime.
Yeah, like that, and I think Brett and Angle are
Yeah, that
like
would have been one of those dream matches for sure.
yeah. I think those are the two biggest fantasy matches that would have.
Sean and AJ, another one.
Yeah, yeah,
You know, and I know that both of them have addressed that, like on that table for three. Sean and AJ talked about, like, you know, the expectations would be too high. Who goes over? Like, like if it's anything short of the greatest pro wrestling match of all time, people will be disappointed
yeah,
because the expectations would be so high. But yeah, this match is just like relentless, just athleticism and just one innovative move, one after another after another. My next note, and I think you'll get this, there is a grace and beauty to Sabu's brand of carnage, is what I wrote. Because like you look at what he does and it's brutal, and like you see like people are landing hard and they're hitting each other hard, and there's chairs and hard landings, but there is a beauty to it and a gracefulness to
yeah.
it. It's just um
I agree,
yeah,
and that's the thing because he can do all of the high flying that we saw from Scorpio. Sabu can do, but it does come off very differently. Like I know that they're physically built differently. I know Sabu is a little on the smaller side. He isn't like a cruiserweight or anything, but he's very trimmed, especially to
yeah, like Scorp has a bit more
Scorpio.
mass on him, carrying a
Yeah,
bit more weight, and I think he's a bit taller.
yeah.
um
But no, you're right. There is a grace and beauty
yeah.
to Sabu that does kind of set him apart.
Well, I mean, I think like Sabu's one of those guys where it's like if you weren't there, you won't ever get it. If you were there, you know that you were a part of something really special. Like I think Sabu just will never get the credit he deserves for being perhaps one of the most innovative wrestlers ever. Um, and it's just a shame the toll that took on his body, and just like he should be wealthy
Yeah. Yep.
for what he gave to the business versus what he got back. It was not an even trade. You know what I mean?
I couldn't agree more.
And I think we've discussed how the reason he never made it mainstream is he was not willing to compromise being Sabu, unfiltered, unapologetically, without toning it down. And that prevented him from ever being kind of mainstream. Um,
Yeah.
but and then so then we have a sick Rob Van Dam brainbuster off the second rope to Sabu,
Yep.
where he just breaks Sabu in half. Um, and
Yeah.
then like Sabu does kind of like a draping diamond cutter to
Yeah.
Van Dam off the top rope. Just like every single move that either of these guys do is innovative. Like there's not just like, and then he did a suplex, and then he did an arm drag. Like there's everything they do is creative.
Well, and I had made a note. Rob gives new meaning to float like a butterfly.
And that's it. Rob was another one because Rob isn't a small guy.
Yeah.
Like he's a pretty thickly muscled dude, and he's one of those guys that I've heard when he lands on you, it feels like Yokozuna's landing on you. I've heard that about Jeff Hardy too. That like when he does his swanton, it feels like Mabel's coming down on you. That they're like both are deceptively heavy and dense. um, but yeah, Van Dam was super, super smooth with like everything he did. He really did float.
Yep.
um, but yeah, I
I
really love that kind of draping diamond cutter, is how I will describe that off the top.
yeah.
Uh,
I did have a little realization. I was looking at Sabu's ring attire, and it looked like that he was kind of wearing wrapping paper for tights.
I mean, that material on those pants isn't very heavy. I know that.
Yeah, but just like the different colors and everything.
Yeah.
I promised I wasn't bored. It was just a weird shot. I'm like, his pants look like wrapping paper.
Well, I know, like when I've seen him in barbed wire matches, those things shred like tissue paper in a barbed wire match.
Oh, yeah,
Like I remember the barbed wire match with Terry Funk, and his pants are shredded to shit in a barbed wire match. So I know they're not a heavy material for sure. Then Sabu goes for wait a second. Where am I? I lost myself. Yeah, Sabu goes for the triple jump moonsault, which is
mm,
how Sabu beat Van Dam in the previous match. Van Dam gets up his knees. Sabu sells it like he's been shot in the stomach. um, then Van Dam does a second brainbuster off the second rope. And then Van Dam hits the split legged move, looking move.
yeah.
Uh, I remember the first time I saw that. I'd never seen anything like that. Um, so yeah, he hits the second brainbuster off the second rope, the split-legged moonsault, and when he came down with that split-legged moonsault, his knees looked like he caught Sabu right in the face.
Yeah.
That didn't look comfortable, and he
And
gets the win with the split-legged moonsault.
yeah. So I did have another when Rob did the split-legged moonsault, I made a note that um, an RVD is as close to flawless an execution as I think you could get back around here.
Yeah, yep. And that's the thing that's kind of like the contrast about Sabu and Van Dam, because they both had similar styles, but with Sabu, you kind of got the vibe where it's just sort of like very reckless and dangerous. And sometimes he'd slip, or sometimes, you know what I mean? And that added an element of danger to Sabu. Whereas with Van Dam, there was that smoothness. And like with Van Dam, you never thought like he wasn't in complete control.
Yeah,
Whereas with
very.
Sabu, it's sort of like if he does this and messes up, which he very well may do, he could end up crippled. With Van Dam, you never got that sense. With Van Dam, it's like he's got this.
Yeah, and Rob was just surgical in
Yeah.
everything. Um,
Yep.
I also noted that uh, so Rob did have a really cool surfboard to Sabu earlier on.
Yep.
Um, I also noticed, like when I was looking at Sabu's ring attire, just the scars on him. I mean, this guy is a
Yeah.
marked warrior,
Yeah.
like legit, just like a marked warrior. I also remembered that it was mostly uh, Rob Van Dam's influence that made me want to get into martial arts. I took Taekwondo for a couple years. Um, you know, never quite hit his level of uh, performance, but um,
You never did that thing where you did the splits on chairs and you had a massive dumbbell balancing while you were doing it?
no.
That was impressive as hell.
Yes, it was. Um, but yeah, this again, I like how you say it. Like Sabu is just like a car crash, and even though him and Rob have
Yeah.
very similar styles and even similar moves, they the way that they execute them almost couldn't be more different.
Yeah, it's weird because like they're very similar and very different at the same time. Even if they're doing very similar things, the presentation and vibe you get from Sabu doing something is so different from Van Damme, even if they're doing the same thing. You know, yeah, because with Sabu there is that danger, that recklessness, that car crash, throw caution to the wind type of thing.
Mhm.
But with Van Damme, it's just sort of like this dude is so perfect. Like, he's not messing up, and you know it. Like, complete control and precision. Like you mentioned, like this, he's like a surgeon.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
so this, I kind of feel like Sabu putting Van Dam over here. This was kind of Van Dam's coming out party in ECW. This was kind of like Sabu's way of saying, like, take this guy seriously.
Yeah.
Like, I'm the man, and I just put him over cleanly. This is a man to be reckoned with, you know?
Did you feel that the pin came on kind of suddenly?
I don't think so, because I think the combination of the second brainbuster off the ropes, which both look devastating, then the split-legged moonsault, I think that kind of 1-2 punch
Okay.
very convincingly beat Sabu, especially the way his knees hit Sabu in the face on the way down.
Yeah.
So to me, I think that was a good kind of 1-2 punch. Like, okay, that's enough to believably beat Sabu.
Yeah.
You felt like it was
I thought it
a
was well
little,
because he did it once and he kicked out.
yeah.
And so then to just go right back and do it again just felt I don't know.
Well, if at first you don't succeed,
Yeah, I don't know.
try again and follow it up with the split-legged moonsault. Isn't that how it goes?
And I think maybe I was just it was like, oh, he kicked out of Rob's new finish, and Joey was talking about that, and so I think I was expecting Rob to like light him on fire next or something. I don't know.
I
um,
didn't have a problem with it, but I could see why.
no, I didn't have a problem with it.
Oh, okay.
I wasn't trying to say that. It just I don't know. Like I said, maybe I was expecting something else, or I was just tired. But I was like, okay, so he kicked out. Now, again, what's Rob going to do now? Is he going to use a chair and a 5-star frog splash? If so, again, I don't think there was anything amiss with that. That just took me by surprise a little bit.
Yeah, so I do think this is really significant that beating Sabu really shows to the audience, like, because Van Dam was new to the company, like, this dude's here to play. He's a player. This was kind of his coming out party.
How long had he been with ECW at this time? Do you know?
I don't think very long. And I know he had, um, a previous match with Sabu that Sabu won cleanly. But I think, beating Sabu, I think instantly makes you a player
Yeah,
in ECW at this time.
yeah, because
So,
Sabu was a little over at this
a little
time.
bit, a little bit. So,
that when I miss Paul Lee dangerously.
I know.
I like Paul Heyman. I'm a fan of Paul Heyman. I miss Paul Lee
I miss
dangerously.
Paulie too, especially because, like, him in ECW, he believed so much in what he was doing. And he had such a chip on his shoulder and so much to prove that, like, there was so much behind everything he said. You believed anything that came out of his mouth.
Yep.
Um, which I know Tommy was like, Tommy Dreamer said, like, you know, he lied to all the boys, but he never lied to his audience. And it's like when he spoke to the audience, you believed him. And he put it over so much.
Yeah.
Um, so there's like a huge ovation. Um, not so much for Rob, but kind of out of respect for Sabu. Sabu's selling like he's dead.
Yeah.
So now he has to shake Van Dam's hand and acknowledge he respects him, but he's like struggling to get up. Joey Styles and Paul get into the ring. Sabu is acting very, very injured. Paul puts over how hurt Sabu is and how honorable he is. He said Sabu pulled himself away from the paramedics to come back out here and show Van Dam some respect. Paul calls out Van Dam. And Van Dam comes out. Sabu holds out his hand and just respect, uh, which that's more than Sabu ever speaks. So,
Yeah.
this is a big deal just to hear Sabu say one word. Holds his hand out. Van Dam slaps his hand away, says, "Not only do I not respect you, but you're a piece of shit." Throws the mic at Sabu's chest, bails out of the ring, and Fonzie's there with Taz. And Van Dam says, "I do respect you, Fonzie."
Yeah.
Um, and
And
one of my favorite pairings of all time is born.
before I saw that Fonzie was there, I heard him for what had been 2.5 minutes straight of him blowing a whistle into the microphone.
Yeah,
But
Fonzie, even if you can't see him, you know he's there. You can hear him.
yeah, and that was great. I respect you, Fonzie. And then, you know, going down the aisle, and Taz is just there because Taz and Sabu have that feud going on.
Yeah, yep.
So
That
now,
only that Sabu I don't even think knows about that they're feuding. But Taz knows.
yep,
But that ends up, this is kind of the genesis of one of my favorite uh, trios. Is the Van Dam, Sabu, Fonzie team. I love the three of them together, and so here we get uh, Van Dam goes with Fonzie, and it's interesting too to see Van Dam as a heel
yeah,
because he is the ECW babyface. So it's weird to see him as a heel here because it won't last for long.
no, and I really feel that how he would start getting over in ECW was just like how Steve Austin started to get over in the WWF. You just couldn't help but like these guys.
This dude is so fucking good, you can't deny it.
Yeah. And then it's like Rob doesn't even need a story anymore. You just put a title on him and people will fall over backwards to watch his matches with anyone.
And I
Um,
think that's a good comparison to Austin because Austin, you look at like the early Stone Cold stuff, and you're like, you look at his behavior, his promos, and it's like textbook how to be a great heel.
yeah.
And the people loved it. And with Van Dam, like, he's so cocky, he's so arrogant. Of course you're going to hate it. That's why we hated Rick Rude or the model Rick Martel or Shawn Michaels for showing that arrogance. But it was just undeniable. Like, they had this just likable thing about them
Yep.
and just next level talent that you're just like, you can't dislike the guy.
Yeah.
He's too good.
Yep. Yeah, like you said, two guys who were uh, very, very good heels in their promos, in the way they wrestled, and they both literally just turned the tide of the crowd in each promotion and couldn't help but become loved.
Yeah. So yeah, apparently Van Dam does not respect Sabu. He takes off with Fonzie and Taz, and then Sabu leaves on a gurney. So
Yeah,
Sabu really puts over Van Dam strong here, which is a big deal in ECW at this time. So um, phenomenal match, amazing athleticism and innovation, and I remember this match well.
yeah. I what I mostly remember is the way. If I'm being honest, I can pick this out is because of the robe that Rob wore.
Oh yeah,
Because some
the
of their stuff, after all these years, does kind of blend together for
yeah.
me. But I remember that sticking out. Um,
I
so I could
remember
say,
those two brainbusters off the second rope, and Sabu just like breaks in two. Like,
yep,
so then our main event, after we've watched three main event quality matches, this is kind of. I have a little bit of a problem with this going on last. We have the Eliminators, who are the tag team champions,
Yeah.
uh, along with Brian Lee versus Tommy Dreamer and the Gangstas. This match felt out of place as the main event.
Yep.
I would buy Raven, Pipple 2, and Sandman as the main event. I would buy Scorpio and Douglas as the main event. I would buy Van Dam and Sabu as the main event. But with those three things already on this show, this doesn't feel like a main event to me.
I couldn't agree more.
I think
And
if this switched places with the ECW title match, I'm totally fine with that.
I think also is because this match, I guess when they originally made it, had a few different players in it. It was supposed to be Brian Lee with the Jacob and Eli Blue, and they got suspended or something, and so it's like, oh, I'll just go with the Eliminators, which is a really good choice.
Yeah, I mean, I would rather see the Eliminators than the Blue Brothers, certainly.
Yep.
And I know Brian Lee and Dreamer were feuding at this time. The Gangsters and the Eliminators, that's a good feud. I don't have a problem with this match. I have a problem with this match going on last after everything else we have seen.
Yeah.
This seems like a step down
Yeah.
to me. Having said that, it was absolute mayhem within seconds. This was exactly what you would expect this match to be.
Yep.
Cronus being deceptively athletic.
I know. I have a few notes about that. That pudgy dude should not be able to move and flop and bounce around the way
Yeah,
he. I'm sorry, but not sorry.
yeah. And it's funny because I remember like getting tapes and watching the Eliminators. And you know, with tag teams, sometimes there's a breakout star. You know, Sean versus Marty, Brett versus Anvil. You know, there's certain teams where it's like if they split up, that's the dude out of the two that would be the breakout star.
Yeah.
With the Eliminators, I would have guessed Cronus would have been the breakout star because he
Yeah.
was deceptively athletic. He had a cool look and he had the personality, which Saturn never really had personality.
Yeah. And Saturn was pretty small.
Yeah, I mean, he was jacked, but he stature wise, you know, Cronus was the bigger guy. But Cronus
Yeah.
had personality. So it's like it's just funny that out of the two, if I had to pick a breakout single star of the two, it would have been Cronus. And I would have been wrong.
Yeah. I would have as well. So here's the question: why were white X's spray painted over the ECW tag titles?
No idea.
Me neither. I did notice that.
Yeah, I noticed it too, and it was never explained by Joey that
Hmm.
I caught at least, and I was left curious about that myself.
Yeah. Yeah. I wrote Cronus is too fat to move and flip like he does.
Yeah.
That is a compliment.
Yeah, no, he's very athletic for a dude like with a big belly like that.
Yeah. Yes,
I
he helped.
liked I liked it the spot they did where all three guys on the babyface team took a turn flying to the outside with a
Yeah.
different move. I thought that was a fun little spot where each guy had a turn doing it. Um, I enjoyed that.
Yep. And the elephant in the room, natural born killers.
Yeah,
And so I made a note. WWE needs to buy the rights to it. Um, like I've kind of gotten used to Sandman's Muzak
yeah,
cover of Enter Sandman that like you'd hear at Big Y or something. Um,
right.
but it looks like I don't know if this was the first time where it played into the match, but it had to have gone at least one full track, and it was
Yeah,
like just watching it was awesome, and then hearing it made me mad.
And that was such a big part of a New Jack match, was that played on a loop the whole time, which I don't think that had ever been done before.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if it has, I certainly wasn't aware of it. But
Mm-hmm.
um, I mean, I guess they did their best, but it does take away a little from the enjoyment of the match for me that
It
I'm
did
not
this time.
hearing Dre and Ice Cube on a loop for the whole match, because that was the perfect song for New Jack, like lyrically.
And the one they played over it, uh, you could never confuse that for Natural Born Killers.
No,
Like I get it, and I know I'm really nitpicky about this, but like you said, this was that song helped make New Jack what he was in ECW.
yeah, like you
Very
could not
talented, but
pick a better song to embody what New Jack is about. And I remember watching the matches and listening to the lyrics as I'm watching what's happening, and it's almost like, God, that what I'm seeing fits perfectly with what I'm hearing. Where it's like listening to the lyrics, and then meanwhile, like New Jack's tearing someone's face up with a cheese grater, and I'm like, yes, like that's.
yeah.
um,
So uh, that did stick out. I
yeah,
really still want to know why the tag belts had those X's spray painted on them. Like
yeah, I don't know.
after they had made their first trip around the arena and got back in the ring, I remember looking and it looked like a bomb had gone off.
Yeah,
Just dirt and chunks of stuff everywhere. I mean, it looked like there was a literal war in there. And this reminded me quite a bit of how it went with the Eliminators and the Pitbulls.
yeah,
Like they made their rounds, but there's just stuff everywhere. I mean,
yeah.
this
They just tore the building apart. Like,
I know this almost didn't resemble a wrestling match, and that's a compliment too.
yeah,
um,
I had to pop for Tommy goes to pile drive Lee on a chair. Stevie Richards runs out, and he's still in his underwear from like 2 hours ago. That whole time he didn't put on pants. And I just popped that he ran out still in his underwear. Um, he kicks Tommy in the back of the head. He does the HBK pose on the apron. Um, and again, I had to. There's so much fun stuff that's just laced throughout this show. Beulah and Kimona are down on the floor. They reach up and they each grab a handful of Stevie and they lead him literally by the balls to the back. I thought that was funny.
yep.
Um, Tommy smashes a chair into a cinder block, which is on top of Brian Lee.
Yeah.
Um, he sets
It,
Saturn off the top through a table, and Saturn looks dead.
yep. At one point, right around here, Saturn went for a pin, and I'm like, "This isn't a wrestling match. What are you doing? Oh, what a noob going for a pin."
uh,
And again, and that's just like a testament that this was. I don't know if this really fits towards the end. Like you said, I have a lot of those similar feelings, but this, I don't know how the rest of the card would have flowed if this was in the middle. I'm not saying that it works the best at the end, but again, it looked like a bomb had gone off there.
the thing is, I enjoyed this match. It was exactly what I would want from these six guys. I just don't like the placement because there are three matches on this show that I think are main event quality matches. This one I don't think is a main event quality match. Like, I would be okay with Van Dam and Sabu closing it out. The show is named after that match. That's fine. Scorp and Douglas certainly was a main event quality match. And then I think if the three-way match for the world title was last, if that switched places with this, I think that would have flowed fine. Because I think
Yeah.
if the main event was where the Raven match was, this would have been like a violent car crash kind of match, and it would have been followed by Sabu, or no, it would have been followed by Scorpio and Douglas.
Yeah.
I'm fine with that because that would be a good change of pace, and then you could have the three-way match as the main event. But so that was my only objection with it. The match itself I enjoyed. I just thought after everything we've seen, this was not as good
Yeah.
as those three matches I mentioned. So it did feel like a step down to close the show out.
Yeah. I could see that.
See. So then the match ends when New Jack dives off the top and drives the chair into Saturn. He gets the pin. And my note was, I'm kind of spent after the three-way title match, the TV title clinic, and the Sabu and Van Dam Classic.
I was exhausted.
Yeah.
I was exhausted.
Man, if you were there in that crowd, you would have gotten your money's worth, man. I
Yeah.
don't know what tickets went for back then, but you would have got your money's worth if you paid for a ticket to this show. That's for damn sure.
Yeah. My last note was what an absurdly packed card this
It
was.
really was. And such a variety of different things, because that's what I love in a wrestling show is, I want to see a great tag match. I want to see a match that's violent. I want to see classic wrestling. I want to see some flying. I want to see some comedy. This gave you all of that, and um, yeah, this
Yeah.
this was a really, really fun show.
Yeah. This yeah is very arguably like the greatest event we've covered so far. And I know great can mean a few different things, but I can't think of anything else they could have put on this card that they didn't already have or that would add to what they already had. It
Taz crippling the guy.
well done. Well done. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, this was like, yeah, I mean, I think from beginning to end, I might agree with you that this might be the best show from beginning to end that we've covered.
Hmm. I think it is.
I can't think of one off the top of my head that beats this out.
Mania 12 was really good. Um,
Yeah,
but that's
that one was. I mean, we
but
both talked about how special that was.
and that is
Um,
WrestleMania. This
yeah,
wasn't even a pay-per-view.
right.
And granted, they didn't have pay-per-views to compete with, but I mean, and I think it's perfectly fine for you and I to sit here and compare this to WrestleMania 12 as well.
That says a lot about this show.
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously, I get a very different feeling from this show than I got from Mania 12.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I can't argue with you that this might be beginning to end the best show we've covered. Um,
All right. What is your match of the night?
this was really hard because, again, when I selected this show for us to cover, the only match I had seen was Sabu and Van Dam.
Mhm.
And I was like, all right, well, clearly nothing is going to touch that. And I was wrong. There are three matches that I think are millimeters apart in awesomeness. That being Sabu Van Dam, the three-way title match, and Scorpio and Douglas. If I had to pick one, I think I got to go with Scorpio and Douglas as my match of the night.
Me too.
You too? Yeah.
Yep.
And it's really hard to say that because on any other show, any of those three matches would have been match of the night, and they all happen to be on the same show. I
Yeah.
feel like I'm disrespecting the other two matches by picking Scorpio and Douglas, but that to me was just it did steal the show.
Yeah. Yep. Sabu and Van Dam was everything I thought it would be.
Yeah.
Um, the
And
three-way
man, was that
dance.
three-way match fun.
That was more than I was expecting, and I was expecting a lot.
That I would almost put that in the category, like when I think about, I think out of all the shows we've covered, probably the match that I think was the single most fun match to cover with you was probably Shawn Michaels versus Rick Martel with
Yeah,
Sherry in the middle. That to me was probably the most fun I had covering a match with you. That three-way match is up there
yeah,
with that. That might be number two for me as far as just having fun talking about a match. That would probably be second for me, that Raven Sandman Pitbull match.
yeah. I think that is like a great comparison. You're right.
Because that was so fun when we covered Rick Martel and Shawn Michaels.
Yeah, and that
And
one
just
almost stole
everybody's
the show.
performance in that. Yeah.
Um, and even though this wasn't as silly, that three-way dance was, I mean, notch for notch, just as fun.
There was
Anyway,
so much going on, and no one missed a beat. And
yeah. Um,
This
I know.
show, I think, was as close to perfect as you can get. It really is.
Yeah,
My only objection would be that the main event being the main event. I think that should have switched places with the three-way match. That's the only critique I have of this show. Um,
yeah. Well, and even then, I think we're both reaching to be nitpicky to kind
right.
of evaluate it on an even field, and so
Yeah, that doesn't ruin the show for me by any means, but
yeah,
it's that would probably be the one complaint I had about this match or this show. Um,
yeah.
Moment of the night. This was a hard one for me.
I know. I and then like even after like last night when I was done and was wrapping up my notes, I still had to kind of stop and it's like, is this really what is yours?
I can't pick one. I will tell you the ones that I wrote. Don't make me pick one, but out of the this whole show, which was loaded with great moments, um, Joey asking if Sandman respects him was up there. The shenanigans with Stevie and Meanie was up there. Douglas's power bomb on the concrete
Yeah.
was up there. Bubba's but big tits was up there, and Douglas's post match promo. All
Yeah.
of those, I can't decide between those.
Mine was his promo
Yeah,
and um like on a more comical side, there was a couple things in the FBI match that I really got out of like um the crowd at one point was chanting JT sucks dick and so they just started walking down the aisle. They're going to the curtain. Like they got all the way down there too
they're gonna go
and
watch Rocky.
they're
They don't need to put up with that shit.
yeah. Um the the triple lockup at the very
That was fun.
beginning. Yeah, I popped really big for that.
Yeah,
And so there's a couple things that were kind of cool, but um, yeah, Sabu or Scorpio and Shane is my match of the night, and his promo at the end is my moment.
so would you say Douglas was probably the MVP of this show?
I don't know how I could say otherwise.
And it's funny because the last ECW show that we covered was CyberSlam, I believe. And my match of the night was, and I believe yours was as well, was Sabu and Scorpio.
Yeah,
So this is the second Scorpio back to back stealing the show.
that is true.
Second Scorpio match that steals the show, and stealing the show that is this stacked is really impressive.
Yeah, yeah. I had forgotten about that. That was Our match of the night there.
Yeah, back-to-back match of the nights for Sabu. For Scorpio.
And there was even like when Scorpio came out for the TV title match, he brought a beer with him,
Yeah.
or he grabbed the beer and then
Yeah.
like he drank it and he tried to spit it like at Shane in the ring. And Joey's like Scorpio taking some pointers or something from his tag team partner. I thought that was funny.
Yeah.
Because that's very out of like the Sandman is nowhere near in character
Right.
to what him and Scorpio are, and so that was cool that they made that work.
There were so many little things that were really great.
Yeah.
Like funny spots. Like I laughed a lot on this show. Like there was so much humor on this show.
Yeah, that's the thing. This was so much more than I was expecting. I loved this and was so
Yeah.
entertained.
Yeah, when I watched this show exceeded my expectations, and I was like, I can't wait to talk to Chad about this and get his take on what happens here.
Yeah. Yep. I had a couple comments that I had wrote down. It's like asked him about it. And that. So, what would you? What would if you had to rank these matches? Which one would be at the bottom?
Of the entire show?
Yeah, excluding the opening match before the FBI.
Right. Let me scroll up and review everything on here. All right, I think I've got it, but let me see. As far as match quality, bell to bell, or overall enjoyment of.
Let's do both. Or let's just do overall enjoyment, personal preference.
The one that I think overall entertained me the least, and this sounds surprising looking at it on paper, is Chris Jericho's match.
That's what I have right here too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Who would have guessed that, huh?
Yeah, his match with Mikey, which I could sit down and watch that randomly and be like, cool.
Yeah.
I like this. And so it's yeah. Yep, that was my pick as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. Your show is good when Jericho's performance is the least impressive one on the show.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like we're kind of on the same page with our opinions about this show and the matches we like the most and the least. But that says a lot when Jericho's match is the least entertaining.
Yeah. Well, and that also kind of makes me think that we both probably approached this with pretty similar expectations.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, because we both know what Jericho will go on to become.
Yeah.
So.
And again, it's not like he had anything close to a bad match either.
No, he didn't. But like, if we were watching this in 1996, basing this on what we knew of Jericho then, we probably would have been blown away by that. But we know what Jericho will go on to do. So.
Yep.
But yeah, this was a phenomenal show.
Yeah. Yeah, this is up there for me with WrestleMania 12, and it's up there with one of the best shows I think we've covered.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
All right. Any closing thoughts?
It'll be interesting comparing this to Beware of Dog. That's for sure. Because that's what we got next, right? I don't think
Sorry.
I don't think from beginning to end that Beware of Dog is going to be as good as this.
Well said.
We'll find out next week.